Welcome. You are here now. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, and nothing at all that needs your attention tonight. You have made it to the end of the day, and the end of the day is a soft and quiet place. You can set everything down now. Every thought you were carrying, every little concern that has been following you around. You can simply put all down the way you might set a heavy basket on a table at the end of a long walk. Just set it down. It will all be there if you need it later. But right now, you do not need any of it. Right now, there is only this voice and this story and the slow settling of your body into rest. Take a moment to feel where you are lying. Feel the surface beneath you, how it holds you, how it supports every part of you without asking anything in return. Feel the weight of your body, the pleasant heaviness of your legs, the soft sinking of your shoulders. You do not need to move. You do not need to adjust. You are exactly right just as you are. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about a very ordinary day in a very small village. It happened a long, long time ago, in a time we call medieval period, somewhere in the quiet green countryside of a land that looked very much like England. The village was small. The days were slow. Nothing very much happened. And that is exactly the kind of story that is going to carry you gently to sleep. So let yourself settle a little more. Let your eyes be closed, or let them close on their own if they have not already. There is no hurry. We will move very slowly through this day together, through the early morning light, through the soft routines of people living simple, quiet lives, through bread baking and water drawing and the slow turning of a wooden wheel, through the ordinary, unhurried, wonderfully uneventful hours of a day long ago. There is nothing to figure out. There is nothing to remember. There's only the soft sound of this story and the easy, drifting feeling of your body growing heavier and more still. Before we begin, just take one slow breath. Breathe in, slowly, through your nose, and feel your chest rise just a little. And breathe out, long and even, through your mouth, letting everything go with that breath. There is nothing urgent. There is nothing to solve. Just a breath going in and a breath going out and the quiet space between. Do that once more if you like. Breathing in slowly, easily, and breathing out even more slowly than before. You might notice your shoulders drop just slightly. You might notice the muscles around your eyes softening. Your jaw, if it has been holding on a little, can let go now. There is no need to hold on to anything. Your mind may wander tonight, and that is perfectly fine. Thoughts may drift through. Let them drift. You do not need to follow them or hold on to them or push them away. Simply let them pass through, the way a cloud passes over a pale winter sky. Slowly, quietly, without leaving anything behind. And then come back to the voice and to the soft edges of the story and to the feeling of your body growing heavier and more restful with every passing minute. We're going to step into a world that is quiet and green and very, very far away from anything complicated. A world without electricity, without hurry, without anything louder than a rooster crowing or a church bell ringing in the distance. A world made of wood and stone and clay and bread and wool and slow-turning seasons. And in that world, in one small corner of it, there's a village. It is early morning there. The sky is just beginning to lighten. The stars are fading one by one. And the day is beginning its long, slow, unhurried unfolding. The village sits in a shallow valley, tucked between two gentle hills that are covered in pale grass and scattered with sheep. The hills are not dramatic hills. They do not rise sharply or cast long, dramatic shadows. They are soft, rounded hills, the kind that look as though the land simply swelled upward very gently and then stopped. There are trees along the ridge of each hill, old trees, with thick gray trunks and wide canopies that are bare right now in the late autumn cold. Their branches like fine dark lines drawn against the pale gray-white of the early morning sky. Below the hills in the valley, the village is still and quiet. There are perhaps 20 buildings in all, most of them small, low, and thatched with straw that has gone a soft gray-brown with age. The walls are made of mixture of clay and straw and small stones, and they are the color of pale earth, a sandy, warm, yellowish gray that is very pleasant to look at in soft light. Each building sits low to the ground, as though it is crouching slightly, keeping close to the warmth of the earth beneath it. There is a narrow path that runs to the middle of the village, no wider than a cart's width, packed down over many years of walking and wheel rolling into a firm, pale surface. Along this path, a few small gardens grow close to the buildings. Not summer gardens, not flowering gardens, but winter gardens full of rough, dark soil and the stubby remains of autumn vegetables. A few leeks still stand in one. A row of kale hunkers down at the edge of another, its dark leaves thick and waxy and heavy with morning moisture. Everything is damp. The grass is wet. The thatch is wet. The path has a faint sheen to it in the very early light. There's been a light frost in the night, and the frost is just beginning now to melt very slowly in the first pale suggestion of warmth from the rising sun. Here and there a faint curl of smoke rises from the top of a thatched roof. One or two of the villagers have already stirred their fires back to life, and the smoke goes straight up into the still, windless air, rising slowly, thinning as it goes, dissolving into the gray white of the sky without any hurry at all. The church bell has not rung yet. The village is not fully awake. Most of the doors are still closed. Most of the people are still inside, still wrapped in their wool blankets, still breathing the slow, warm breath of sleep. It is that particular time of morning that exists in a thin, quiet space between the night and the day, when the sky is light, but the world has not quite begun yet, when everything is still possible, when nothing has gone wrong yet, and nothing is being asked of anyone. In one of the small, low buildings near the center of the village, there is a woman named Mira. She is perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair that is going gray at the temples, and she has been awake for just a few minutes. She did not wake with a start. She simply came gradually up out of sleep, the way a leaf comes gradually up through still water, drifting upward without any particular urgency. She lay still for a while, aware that she was awake, but not yet fully here, and then slowly, she turned herself over and sat up. She is sitting on the edge of her sleeping pallet now, which is a wide, low frame made of rough wood, spread with a straw-stuffed mattress and covered with 2 thick blankets of undyed wool. The room she is in is small and low-ceilinged. The walls are thick, and the one small window, a window with no glass, just a wooden shutter pulled almost closed, letting only a thin sliver of morning gray. The room smells of wool and with smoke and the faint earthy smell of dried herbs hanging from a rafter near the far wall, bundles of rosemary and thyme, and something sharp and slightly sweet that is difficult to name exactly. Mira sits for a moment, not doing anything. She is not thinking about anything in particular. She is simply sitting the way a person sits when they have not quite arrived at themselves yet, when the day has not quite pulled them in. Her feet are on the cool clay floor. She can feel the cold of it through her wool stockings, which she slept in, along with a long linen underdress, and a heavier wool overdress that she put back on when she woke, because the morning is cold. She runs her hands once over her skirts, smoothing them down, not for any particular reason, just because her hands want something to do. Then she stands, slowly. Her knees do not care for the cold mornings, and she straightens up carefully, one hand resting lightly on the wooden bed frame for a moment, and then she stands straight and takes a slow breath and turns toward the fire. The fire is in the center of the room, a stone border hearth set into the clay floor, with a metal hook above it on a chain from a beam, and a low iron pot hanging from a hook. The fire is burned down through the night to a mound of soft gray ash with a few small orange coals still glowing faintly in the center. It is not cold yet. It is warm if you sit close to it, but the warmth does not reach the edges of the room very well, and the air near the window and door is noticeably cool. Mira crouches beside the hearth and leans forward slightly, looking at the coals. She can see them glowing, a warm orange red, very soft and steady, like something breathing very slowly. She reaches the side of the hearth, where a stack of small dry pieces of wood is kept, and picks up 2 pieces. They are thin pieces, not much thicker than her thumb, dry and pale from being stored inside for weeks. She sets them carefully over the coals, not dropping them, not pressing them down hard, just laying them gently, at an angle to each other, so that the air can move between them. Then she waits. She stays crouching, her hands resting loosely on her knees, and she watches the fire. For a long moment, nothing happens. The wood sits there. The coals glow steadily beneath it. And then, very gradually, a thin ribbon of smoke begins to rise from the nearest piece of wood, curling upward, pale gray against the darker air of the room, and then a very small tongue of flame, barely visible, licks up along one edge of the wood, and then another. The flame grows, not quickly, not dramatically, but in that unhurried, creeping way that fire grows when it is finding its own pace, feeling its way forward. Mira watches this without any expression in particular. It is simply something she does every morning, and it is simply happening, and that is enough. When the fire is burning steadily, she adds 2 more pieces of wood, a little larger this time, and then she stands again and wipes her hands in front of her overdress and goes to get the water. The water is kept in a large clay vessel near the door, a wide, round vessel with a slight roughness to it, where the clay was not completely smooth before firing, and a small crack near the base that was filled long ago with a paste made of clay and fat and dried as seal that has held for many years. The vessel is perhaps half full. Mira lifts the wooden lid and sets it aside and scoops out a small amount of water with a wooden ladle into a smaller clay cup. And she drinks it slowly, in 2 long swallows, and puts the cup down. The water is cold. It is always cold in the morning. The coldness of it is simply what it is, not unpleasant, not shocking, just cold, the way everything is cold in the early morning before the fire has had time to warm the air. Mira does not think anything in particular about the coldness of the water. She sets the cup down on the small low table near the door and goes back to the fire. She lifts the iron pot off its hook and carries it to the water vessel and dips it in, scooping up water until the pot is about half full, and then she carries it back to the fire and hangs it back on the hook. The fire is burning more strongly now. It has found its footing, and the flames are a soft orange and yellow, not high, just steady, wrapping themselves around the bottom of the pot with a slow, comfortable, unhurried warmth. Now there is nothing to do but wait for the water to warm. And Mira is very good at waiting. She has been waiting for things all her life. For bread to rise, for rain to stop, for the fire to heat, for the day to begin. And waiting is simply a part of how things happen, and it does not trouble her. She pulls a low stool to the side of the fire and sits down on it and folds her hands in her lap and looks at the fire. The stool is a very simple thing. 3 thick legs joined to a round seat, all of it smoothed down with long use to a warm dark color. She has sat on this stool every morning for more years than she can particularly remember, and the stool has a slight permanent lean to it from the unevenness of the floor, and she leans with it, because that is simply how the stool is. The fire crackles once, softly. The pot hangs still. The room is beginning very gradually to warm. Not warmly yet, but the sharp cold edge of the air is slowly softening. Outside, a bird calls once from somewhere nearby, a small, flat sound, not particularly musical, more of a single note than a song, and then goes quiet again. In a little while, the water in the pot begins to shiver. Small movements first, very small, ripples just barely breaking the surface, the way the first breath of a breeze moves across a pond. Then a few small bubbles begin to form along the bottom and the sides of the pot, rising up through the water very slowly. This is not boiling yet. This is only the water waking up, beginning to move, beginning to come to life in the warmth. Mira watches it without urgency. She reaches up to the dried herbs hanging from the rafter and pinches off a small amount of dried thyme between her fingers. The leaves crumble softly, releasing their scent, a dry, warm, slightly dusty smell, and drops it into the water. The little pieces of dried leaf float on the surface for a moment, then slowly begin to darken and sink. She does this every morning. It is not for any particularly dramatic reason. Simply because the warm water with a little thyme in it is a pleasant thing to start the day with, and because her mother did it before her, and because some things are worth doing simply because they have always been done. After a while, she ladles a small amount of the warm thyme water into her cup and wraps her hands around the cup and holds it. She does not drink it immediately. She simply holds it, feeling the warmth seep through the clay into her palms, and breathes in the steam that rises from it, and sits. This is the very beginning of the day in the small medieval village. The fire is burning. The water is warm. The sky outside is growing slowly, steadily lighter, and there is nothing else required at this moment. Across the narrow path from Mira's house, in a building that is slightly larger and somewhat lower ceilinged, there is a man named Edric, who is the village's miller. Edric is older than Mira, perhaps 55, with a broad back and large, slow-moving hands that are white with flour dust even first thing in the morning, because the flour seems to have worked its way into every crease of his skin over the years. He has been awake for a little while longer than Mira, because the meal requires attention early in the day, but he is not in a hurry either. He is standing at his own fire, which is larger than Mira's because his house is larger and colder, and he is holding a piece of bread from the day before, holding it near the fire on a long fork made from a split stick, turning it slowly to warm it through. The bread is a round, flat, dark-colored loaf, very dense, made from rye flour, and has a particular smell when it warms. A deep, slightly sour, yeasty smell that fills the low room and makes the air feel somehow softer and more friendly. Edric turns the bread slowly. One side, then the other. He is not thinking about much. He slept well, and his back is only a little stiff this morning, which is a good morning for his back. He can hear one of his chickens moving around outside, a soft, low, clucking sound, barely audible through the thick walls, but there. He will need to let them out when he goes to the mill, he thinks, without any particular urgency. He will let them out, and they will do what chickens do, which is wander and scratch and make their soft clucking sounds, and they will be fine. The bread is warm now on both sides. He takes it off the fork and sets it on the small wooden board on the table, and goes to find the salt. The salt is in a small clay pot with a lid, kept near the fire to stay dry, because salt that gets damp becomes a problem, and salt is not cheap. He takes a small pinch of it, a careful pinch, not a large one, and scatters it over the warm surface of the bread. The salt catches the light from the fire just for a moment, tiny glittering points, before it settles into bread and becomes invisible. He sits down at the table and eats the bread slowly, in small bites, chewing carefully and completely, looking at nothing in particular, simply eating his bread beside his fire on an ordinary morning. By the time Edric has finished his bread, the sky outside has lightened considerably. The pale gray of earliest morning has become a brighter, whiter gray, still overcast, still no sun yet, but brighter, the kind of light that seeps through the thatch and around the edges of shutters and under doors and makes the dark interiors of the houses gradually a little less dark. One by one, here and there across the village, the sounds of morning are beginning to assemble themselves into the ordinary music of the day. A door opens somewhere. The sound of it, the dry wooden scrape on the clay floor of the threshold, and feet step out onto the damp path. A dog stirs from where it has been sleeping under a wooden bench, and stretches with a long, slow motion, and yawns silently, and then stands there for a moment looking at nothing in particular. A child's voice, somewhere at the far end of the village, says something short and not very loud, and is answered by a lower, quieter adult voice, and then both voices are gone. The church bell rings. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 more, 5 bells. The bell has a particular sound in this village, which is a slightly flat sound with a long, slow fade, because the bell is old and has a small crack in it that nobody has ever fixed, and this crack gives the bell its voice, and the voice is familiar to everyone in the village in a way that only a sound you've heard every day of your life can be familiar, a sound so ordinary, so deeply woven into the texture of the day, that it is almost not a sound at all, but simply a sensation, a feeling, that the day has officially arrived. At the sound of the bell, Mira sets down her cup and stands and pulls her heavy wool shawl from the peg near the door and wraps it around her shoulders. It is time to go to the well. The well is at the center of the village, not far from the church, which is the tallest building in the village. Not very tall, just a low stone building with a square tower at one end that rises perhaps 2 stories above the ground. The church is made of the same pale stone as the hills, and has a very simple door of thick dark wood with a plain iron latch, and 2 very small windows on each side, round-topped, each with a single cross piece of stone dividing them. There's a yew tree growing very close to one corner of the church, a very old yew tree with a trunk that is dark and deeply grooved, and a canopy that spreads wide and low and stays dark green all year round. The well is a stone circle perhaps 4 feet across, with a wooden frame over it and a simple wooden mechanism for the bucket, a horizontal log that turns on a peg, with a rope wound around it, a bucket hanging from the end of the rope. The rope is wet from the overnight damp, and it has a roughness to it, a prickliness, that Mira can feel through her palms as she takes hold of it and begins to lower the bucket. The bucket descends with a slow turning of the log, the rope unraveling steadily. the bucket swinging slightly as it goes down into the dark. She can hear it going down, the soft whir of the turning log, the very faint sound of the rope, and then, after a moment, the sound of the bucket touching the water far below, a soft, round sound, a hollow sound, the sound of something entering stillness. She waits a moment for the bucket to fill, and then she turns the log the other way, slowly, steadily, bringing the bucket back up. It is heavier now. The rope is wet and cold, and the turning takes some effort. But Mira has done this every morning for a very long time, and her arms know how to do it without her thinking about it very much. Hand over hand, slow and steady, the log turning, the rope winding up, and then the bucket appears at the top of the well, dark with water, dripping, swinging just slightly on the rope. She holds the bucket still for a moment and tips it carefully into the wide clay vessel she has brought with her on a low wooden cart. The water pours in a thick, glassy sound, a pleasant, clean sound, and Mira watches it for a moment, this very ordinary thing, the water going from one vessel to another, which she has watched every morning for years and years, and which will never be particularly different and does not need to be. A few other women have come to the well by now, or are on their way. An older woman named Agnes is pulling her own cart slowly along the path in the far end of the village, wrapped in a gray wool cloak with the hood pulled up, moving at a pace that is entirely her own pace and does not seem to have anything to do with hurry. She walks the way very old women sometimes walk, with a kind of settled certainty, each step placed deliberately, taking exactly as long as it takes. She is not slow because she is tired. She is slow because she has decided that slow is the right speed, and she decided this a long time ago and has never had any reason to change her mind. She reaches the well just as Mira is lifting her cart handle to go back. They exchange a few words, nothing important, nothing that needs to be remembered. Something about the cold, something about the frost on the thatch, something about whether the bread has risen. Their voices are low and unhurried. They do not look at each other with any great intensity. They simply speak the way people speak when they have known each other all their lives and have nothing in particular to prove to each other, easily, with space between the words, with long pauses that are not uncomfortable. Mira begins to walk her cart back toward her house. The wheels of the cart are slightly uneven, and they make a soft, rhythmic sound on the packed dirt of the path. A small thud and then a roll, a small thud and then a roll. Over and over she walks. The water in the vessel rocks slightly as the cart moves, but does not spill. She walks slowly and carefully, keeping the cart steady, and the path is familiar, and the morning air is cold on her face, and the shawl is warm around her shoulders. And that is the whole of what is happening right now, and it is entirely enough. Let yourself settle a little more deeply now. Your body is heavy and warm, wherever you are lying. You are very far from that cold village morning, very warm, very safe, very still, and yet the sounds of it are there with you. The soft turning of the well rope, the small thud of the cart wheels, the very distant sound of that cracked church bell fading away into the pale gray morning air. These sounds do not ask anything of you. They are simply there, softly, far away, like a sound heard through a wall. Let your breath be easy, in and out, slow and even. You do not need to do anything with your breath. Just let it happen, the way breathing has always simply happened, without you having to remember to do it, without you having to try. It has been happening all your life without any effort from you at all, and it is happening now, in and out, softly and steadily, the way the water in the well is still and steady far below the village, undisturbed, cool and dark, and perfectly quiet. We will go on with the day now. There is much more of it to tell, a slow, ordinary, quietly wonderful amount of it, and all of it is gentle, and none of it requires anything of you, and you can simply let it drift past you, or let it carry you, or let it simply be there, somewhere near, while you rest. Back in her house, Mira sets the water vessel in its place, and begins the next part of the morning, which is the bread. She does this every other day, not every day, because the baking takes time and fuel, and it is not necessary every day. And today is a baking day. She knows it is a baking day because she put the starter to work last night, which is a small clay pot containing a living mixture of flour and water and wild yeast that she has been keeping alive and feeding for many years, that her mother gave her when she married and moved to this house, and that her mother's mother gave to her mother before that. The starter is older than Mira by a long way, which is a thing she knows but does not think about very often. The starter has been sitting near the warm side of the hearth all night, wrapped in a cloth, and this morning when Mira uncovers it, it has risen and softened and developed a sharp, pleasant, slightly alcoholic smell that means it is working well. She looks at it for a moment, nods very slightly, and begins. The flour is kept in a large wooden chest near the wall, in a tight-fitting bag of undyed linen. She unties the bag and takes out the wooden scoop, and scoops flour into the wide, shallow, heavy clay bowl that she uses for mixing. The flour falls in a soft heap, fine and pale, with a very slight grayness to it, because it is not entirely white flour. It has some of the rougher grain in it, which makes it better for the body and gives the bread a deeper flavor, though Mira does not think of it in those terms. She simply knows this flour, this bowl, this action. She makes a hollow in the center of the flour with her fist, pressing down, turning her fist slightly, leaving a smooth round depression, and then pours in the starter and a measure of water, warm water from the pot still hanging over the fire, measured by eye because she has measured it by eye so many times that her eye is perfectly accurate now. The water disappears into flour around the edges of the hollow. She adds a small pinch of salt and then puts her hands in. The mixing begins slowly. She works from the outside of the bowl inward, pulling flour from the sides into the wet center, pressing and folding, pressing and folding. The dough comes together gradually, first shaggy and rough and quite sticky, pulling at her fingers, then slowly becoming more cohesive, more unified, the separate elements becoming one soft, slightly resistant mass. She works steadily, without rushing, because bread cannot be rushed, and everyone in this village knows that trying to rush bread is a way of ruining bread. And there is no good reason to ruin bread. The room is warmer now. The fire is well established, burning at a comfortable height, and the warmth has reached the corners of the room, and the air has lost its sharp cold edge. The bread smell from Edric's house earlier has been replaced by the smell of this dough, which is a different smell, raw and slightly sour and yeasty and alive. Mira breathes it without thinking about it. She turns the dough, folds it, presses a heel of her hand into it, turns it again. After a while, the dough is smooth enough to shape into a round, and she places it back in the bowl and puts the cloth over it and sets it near the fire to rise. And then that part is done. And there is nothing to do for the dough for a good while, and she wipes her floury hands on a cloth and looks around the room for what to do next. What to do next is the spinning. There is always spinning to do. The pile of raw wool in the corner is never as small as she would like it to be, and the thread she produces is never quite as much as is needed. And so spinning is always what to do next, in any spare moment, in any quiet hour. She takes her spindle from its hook on the wall, a simple thing, a smooth wooden stick with a small round whorl of heavy wood near the bottom to give it weight, and takes a piece of raw wool from the pile, a piece that she combed out yesterday, soft and clean, and slightly greasy still from the animal. She pulls a few fibers free from the bundle with her fingertips and attaches them to the existing thread on the spindle, pinching them together, and then she begins to draft and spin, pulling the fibers slowly and steadily with one hand while the spindle hangs from the thread below, turning slowly on its own weight, twisting the fibers into thread as it turns. The spindle turns, and the thread grows, one arm's length at a time, and when there is enough new thread hanging below her hands, she winds it up onto the spindle and begins again. The sound of the spinning is very small, the faintest whisper of fibers being pulled apart, the almost inaudible turning of the spindle, the occasional soft tap of it against her skirt as it swings. It is a sound that is almost no sound, a sound made of absence. The room is quiet enough that she can hear the fire and the very occasional drip of condensation from the rafters and the distant sound of movement from somewhere in the village outside, and underneath all that, the nearly silent spinning. Mira spins, and the morning passes. She does not count the minutes. The light coming through the shutter crack grows gradually brighter, then less bright as a cloud passes over. She watches the spindle turn. She watches the thread form. She pulls and drafts and winds and begins again, and the pile of raw wood does not seem to grow very much smaller. But the spindle grows gradually fuller, and that is progress, and it is enough. Outside, the village is fully awake now, moving through its morning at its own pace. The smith, a large, quiet man called Thomas, has opened the wide, low door of his smithy at the edge of the village, and is working his bellows, building his fire up to a working heat. The bellows make a rhythmic sound, a slow, breathy push and release, and the fire in the forge respond to each push with a low, rushing roar, just for a moment, before settling back. The coal in the forge turns from dark to orange to near white at its center, and Thomas stands back from the heat and looks at it with his hands on his hips and decides it is nearly right. He is going to spend much of the day working on a replacement hinge for one of the barn doors. The hinge is a simple thing, a long flat strap of iron with a looped end, a thing he has made many times before. But the making of it is not quick, and it requires attention, and this is a day for that work. He pulls on his thick leather apron and ties it and takes up his tongs, and by the time he reaches his hammer, the fire is ready. Nearby, a boy of perhaps 10 or 11 is walking slowly through the village with a large wicker basket on his back, going house to house to collect the scraps that will go to the pigs. His name is Will, and he is the son of one of the farmers, and collecting scraps is one of his morning tasks. He stops at each door, and the door opens or doesn't. Most of them open, and a hand extends with a small bundle of vegetable peelings or stale crusts or a cabbage leaf with a hole in it, and Will takes the offering and says a word or two of thanks and moves on to the next door. He is not particularly thinking about what he is doing. He is thinking about a stick he found yesterday near the mill pond, which was an unusually good stick, straight and smooth and the right weight, and which he left leaning against the fence at the edge of the field, and which he intends to go back for later. He thinks about the stick the way children think about their important things, with a warm, low-level pleasure, a quiet background glow of looking forward to something. He does not hurry through his task. He walks steadily from door to door, the basket growing gradually heavier on his back, his breath a faint mist in the cold morning air. The morning deepens. Somewhere between the 5th bell and the 6th bell, which will ring at midday, the village passes through the middle stretch of its morning in that particular way that mornings have of feeling like they have always been going and will always be going, not long, not short, just continuous. The way water in a stream is continuous, not arriving and not leaving, but simply always there. In the field behind the church, 2 men are working on a section of fence that has fallen during the autumn storms. It is not complex work. One man holds a post while the other drives into ground with a heavy wooden mallet. A slow, steady rhythm of blows, the mallet coming up and coming down, coming up and coming down, the post ascending one careful increment at a time. Between blows, the 2 men are quiet. Between posts, one of them sometimes says something, and the other sometimes responds, and sometimes doesn't. The mallet blows echo softly off the stone wall of the church, and then fade into the still air. The sheep on the hill above the village have been let out to the lower field, and they are doing what sheep do, which is to wander very slowly in a loose cluster, heads down, eating the short wet grass in small deliberate bites, lifting their heads occasionally for no clear reason, and looking at nothing in particular, and then lowering their heads again. They make occasional soft sounds, not bawing exactly, more low, muttered, murmuring sort of sound, not unhappy, not urgent, simply there, like a very gentle background commentary on the state of the grass, which continues to be acceptable. The dog from earlier has attached itself to the fence-mending men in a loose, unofficial way, lying down a few feet away and watching the work with mild, entirely theoretical interest, occasionally raising its head when the mallet strikes, and then lowering it again when nothing particularly alarming occurs. The dog's tail moves once in a while, a single slow wag, directed at no one in particular, expressing nothing more than a general low-level contentment with the morning. Let the morning settle around you like the morning is settling the village, not pushing, not arriving, simply continuing. Your eyes are closed. Your body is easy and heavy. The sounds of the village are far away and getting farther. The way sounds fade when you are falling gently into sleep, not disappearing, just becoming softer, more distant, more like something half-remembered than something happening. The smell of the bread is beginning to move through the air of Mira's house now. A faint, early smell. Not the full, rich smell of fully baked bread, but the very first warmth of it, the first breath of it, the suggestion of bread. The dough has risen, slowly in its own time, in the warmth near the fire, until it has overflowed just slightly at the sides and becomes soft and pillowy and slightly domed. Mira comes back to it and uncovers it and looks at it for a moment, pressing one finger gently into the surface. The dough springs back slowly. It is ready. She shapes it, A quick practice thing, not artistic, just useful, pressing it into a round and putting it in the covered clay pot she uses for baking, and hangs it over the fire, not directly in the hottest part, but off to the side, where the heat is more even and gentle. And now it will bake slowly for a long time, filling the room with its smell and its warmth. And there is nothing to do with it until it is done. The midday bell rings. 6 bells, each one fading before the next one sounds, the last one hanging in the still air for a long time before it thins to nothing. At the sound of the 6th bell, there is a small general pause in the village, a moment where everyone seems to stop at the same time, not because anything in particular has happened, just because the bell marks a pause, and marking a pause is what the bell is for. The fence men set down their tools and eat from the cloths they have brought with them, bread and a piece of hard cheese, and a few strips of dried meat, eaten standing near the fence post, looking out across the field toward the hill. The smith banks his fire and goes inside to eat. Will has long since finished collecting the scraps and delivered them to the pigs, who receive them with their usual emphatic interest, and he has gone to Mill Pond Field to retrieve his stick, which is still there, leaning against the fence where he left it, which he knew it would be but which is still pleasing. Mira eats near the fire, sitting on her stool, eating bread from yesterday, because today's bread is not done, and a piece of dried fish in a thick leek soup that she made while the bread was rising, stirring it with a long wooden spoon in a small pot hung beside the bread pot, both pots hanging over the same fire, filling the room with different layers of good smell. The soup is thick and simple, leeks and water, and a small amount of dried peas and a little salt, and she eats it from a wide clay bowl, holding the bowl in both hands, eating with a wooden spoon that is worn smooth and thin at the tip from years of use. She eats slowly. There is no reason to eat quickly. There is time. After eating, the village enters its afternoon in the same way it entered its morning, gradually, without announcement, one thing simply becoming the next thing with no clear line between them. The spinning continues. The fence continues. In the smithy, Thomas has heated the iron several times now and beaten it and reheated it and beaten again, and the hinge is beginning to take shape. It is still rough, still requires more work, but the general form is there, and the form is right, and that is the kind of progress that happens in good steady work, the kind that doesn't show itself fully until later, but that is building all the time. In the small house nearest the mill, there's an old man who has not gone out today. His name is Robert, and he is very old, older than anyone can quite remember him being young, and he sits by his fire in a low chair with his feet on a small wooden rest and his hands folded in his lap, and he is doing very nearly nothing at all. His granddaughter brings him his food and his water, and occasionally puts more wood on his fire, and between her visits he sits in his chair and looks at the fire or closes his eyes, and the afternoon moves around in the way the afternoon moves around everything, slowly, with no particular agenda. Robert is not troubled. He is not thinking about anything very much. He has lived in this village his whole life, more years than he can count exactly, and he has done his work and raised his family, and now his work is done, and he sits by his fire, and the afternoons pass, one after another, each one much like the last, and there is a peace in that which he could not have understood when he was young, but which he understands completely now. The fire in his hearth is a good fire, well built by his granddaughter, burning steadily, giving off an even warmth that reaches his feet and his hands and the front of his chest, and the chair he sits in has a slight hollow worn into the seat from decades of sitting, and he fits into that hollow perfectly, the way something fits perfectly into its own impression, and there he sits, and the afternoon passes, and that is the whole of it. Myra's bread is done. She knows it is done by the smell, which has changed from the warm, rising, yeasty smell of baking into the deeper, drier, fully cooked smell of finished bread. A smell that is brown and warm and slightly nutty. A smell that says that something has been completely changed into what was always going to become. She lifts the pot from the fire with heavy cloth wrapped around her hands. The pot is very hot, and carries it to the table and takes off the lid. The bread sits in the pot, round and slightly domed, its top a deep brown with a few cracks across the surface where the crust split as it rose in the heat. It smells of itself, of grain and warmth and time and fire, and she taps the bottom of it once with her knuckle and listens to the hollow sound it makes. And the sound is right, and so the bread is done. She leaves it to cool on the table. It will not be eaten until it is rested, because bread cut too soon is gummy inside and doesn't taste right, and this bread will be better tomorrow than it is today, but she will cut a small piece this evening. because she always does, just a taste, just to know that it's good, and it will be good. The afternoon is gentling down now, the light beginning its slow withdrawal from the sky. It has been overcast all day, and it will be overcast at dusk, which means that darkness will come gradually and evenly, not a sudden sunset, not a dramatic sky, just a slow dimming, the white-gray light becoming pale gray and then darker gray, and then by degrees, the gray of near dark and then dark. In the fields, the work is finishing. The fence is done, the last post driven, the last rail nailed or lashed into place, the tools collected and carried back to where they are kept. The men walk back to the village at the slow, deliberate pace of people who are tired but not exhausted, who have done what they set out to do and are satisfied in a way that only comes from having done work with your hands, from having made something that was not there before, from having fixed something that was broken. They walk without talking much. One of them says something about the weather, and the other agrees that yes, it will likely frost again tonight. And that is all. Thomas has finished the hinge. It lies on the bench outside the smithy cooling in the afternoon air, a long, flat piece of iron with a rounded loop at one end, still dark from the forge, but already visible in its final form, which is a form of a useful, ordinary, well-made thing. He looks at it for a moment, and then goes inside. Will has spent the afternoon with his stick in the field behind his family's house, doing what boys do with good sticks, which is a variety of things that don't require explanation, and that he would find very difficult to explain anyway, and which have been entirely satisfying. And he comes, and when he is called for supper with his cheeks red from the cold, and his boots wet from the grass, and the stick tucked under his arm, because he is not leaving it outside again tonight. The supper hour in the village is a quiet hour. Fires are stoked up. Pots are hung. Doors are closed against the darkening and returning cold. The sound of the afternoon, the hammering, the animal sounds from the fields, the voices of people working outside, have one by one subsided, until the village sounds are mostly indoor sounds. The low mutter of voices through walls, the clank of a pot, the softness of fire, the slow creak of a door. Mira's supper is simple. She heats the last of the leek soup from midday and adds a little more water and a piece of dried pork to stretch it, and she eats it with a piece of today's bread. Still warm, the crust crackling softly when she cuts it, the inside soft and slightly sour and very good. She eats alone, as she usually does, and she does not mind eating alone. She has eaten alone for many years, and the aloneness of it has become simply the texture of her evenings, which are quiet and her own. After she eats, she washes her bowl in a small amount of water poured from the vessel, wiping it with a cloth, setting it on the shelf above the table. She puts the last of the soup pot near the fire, so it won't freeze in the night. She feeds the fire with 2 more pieces of wood, larger pieces, slow-burning pieces, and banks in the way she knows will keep it going to the night, building it low and steady, so that there will be coals in the morning. She sits for a little while more. She is a little tired now. In the even, pleasant way of someone who has been busy with their hands all day, a tiredness that is not heavy or distressing, but simply the natural settling down of the body at the end of its work. She looks at the fire, which is burning with a quiet, settled warmth. She wraps her shawl a little closer. She thinks about nothing in particular, or rather, she lets thoughts move through her the way they do in the evening, slow and undirected, not leading anywhere, just moving. The fire crackles once, softly. The bread on the table smells of itself. Outside, somewhere in the village, a dog barks once and stops. The night is settling in. Let yourself settle now, too. Let the village settle. Let everything settle. The fire is low and warm. The bread is cooling. The hinge is cooling on the bench in the smithy, dark and still. The sheep are in their fold, standing close together for warmth, their heads low, their breathing slow and even. Old Robert is asleep in his chair, his hands still folded in his lap, the fire in his heart still burning steadily. The room warm and quiet around him. Will is inside, the stick leaning safely against the wall beside the door, where he can see it from his sleeping pallet if he looks. And he looked once and saw it, and then closed his eyes. The village is drawing itself together for the night. One by one, the cracks of light around the shutters are going dark. One by one, the last sound of the evening are falling away. The bell will ring 3 more times before midnight, but the sound of it is becoming, now, the sound of something very distant, very soft, something almost not quite heard. the way all sound are becoming now in the descending quiet. Mira is lying down. She has pulled off her overdress and her shoes, and she is lying on her pallet under the 2 wool blankets, which are heavy and warm, the way heavy wool blankets are, the weight of them pressing gently down on her like something comfortable and familiar. The fire gives off a low, amber glow that shifts softly across the wall and the ceiling, not quite light, just warmth with a little color. The room smells of bread and fire and wool and time. She closes her eyes. In a little while, or perhaps already, she is somewhere between waking and sleeping, in that middle place where the thoughts lose their edges and the body forgets its weight, and things begin to happen in a way that is not quite remembering and not quite dreaming, but something gentler than either. She is not thinking about tomorrow. She is not thinking about anything. She is simply here in the warm dark, in the heavy blankets, and the fire is there, and the bread is there, and the village is there around her in the dark. Every small house with its low fire, every sleeping person and sleeping animal, every stone and beam and post and thatched roof, every field and fence and well and path. All of it still, all of it quiet, all of it resting. The frost is forming again on the outside of the thatch. Very slowly, very quietly, the way frost forms, one tiny crystal at a time, accumulated without any sound at all, building something delicate and precise and temporary out of cold and moisture and the simple patience of the night air. By morning it will be there, faint and white, on the tips of the straw, and by mid-morning it will be gone, and neither its coming nor its going will be noticed by anyone in particular, because it happens every clear night, and it is simply part of what nights are. The stars are out, the clouds of the day have moved on, and the sky above the village is clear and black and very full of stars. Not that anyone in the village is looking at them, because everyone is inside, because it is cold and it is night, but they are there, the same stars that have been there every clear night over this valley for longer than the village has existed, longer than the hills, burning their slow, ancient, utterly indifferent fires very far away, their light arriving here in this small place at the end of its long journey simply because it had nowhere else to be. The night deepens. The fire in Mira's hearth burns lower and lower, the flames becoming first small and then smaller, until they're no longer quite flames, but only a warm orange glow moving slowly across the surface of the coals. The same glow she saw this morning when she woke. The same patient warmth. The room is darker now, but still warm. The warmth stored in the thick clay walls and compacted earth of floor and the heavy blankets and the sleeping body under them. The bread on the table is completely cool. It is still and dark in the room, and the bread is simply there, patient, waiting for tomorrow. The wool in the corner has been reduced very slightly by a morning spinning. The water vessel is almost full. The time hangs dry from the rafter. The stool sits beside the cold hearth, where it always sits. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. Let this be the last image, the last feeling, the stillness of this small room, the warmth of it, the good ordinary smell of it, the sense of everything settled in its place, the sound of nothing but the very last quiet breath of the dying fire, and the silence that comes after, which is not an empty silence, but a full one, full of the quiet breathing of the village, full of the frost and the stars and the sleeping sheep and the slow turning of the earth and the enormously patient, enormously ordinary, enormously peaceful continuation of a night that is simply doing what nights have always done. There is nothing to do. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing to remember and nothing to prepare for, and nothing that is asking anything of you. There is only this. The warmth, the dark, the stillness, the slow, even easy breath. In and out, in and out. The village sleeps. Everything is well. Everything is well. Everything is very, very well.